Welcome back to Impact Quantum, the show where we prove you don't need to wear a lab coat to talk quantum. Today's guest, Brian Lenahan, has written the book. Well, actually several books, on helping businesses make sense of the coming quantum revolution. We'll chat about risk, readiness, and why quantum computing might just make your old IT strategy look, well, a bit classical. Now here's some dubstep.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging industry and ecosystem of quantum computing, where you don't need to have a PhD, you just need to be curious. And one of the most quantum curious people I know is Candice Kahuli. How's it going, Candice?
It's great. Thank you very much. I'm very, very excited today to be here. We're going to be speaking today with Brian Lenahan, who is the founder and chair of the Quantum Strategy Institute. And he's also
a former guest of season 1, I believe. So
correct.
We're super happy to have him back. Sorry, Candice, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good. And I want to say also he's an author, and you see the books behind him. He's an author of Quantum Boost and Quantum Excellence. And very, very exciting. I'm very, very excited today to talk to you.
Yeah. I've read Quantum Boost and it's awesome. I haven't read Quantum Excellence yet, so it is on my bookshelf.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Well, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Frank. You know, so much has transpired since season 1 of Impact Quantum, and I'm really looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, definitely. We're in the virtual green room, updating Brian on all of the personal developments in my life, including moving, adding another kid, and the reason why I mention that is because he sprained his foot yesterday. So it was quite the morning here. Never a dull moment at Chez Lavigne, or Maison Lavigne. I'm not really sure how that would go, but yeah, so you've been busy. You published, I remember we were talking to you just as your first book came out, and then you've had at least one book, and I think possibly up to 3 have come out since then.
Yep, that's the right count. I'm up to about 8 books that I have now published. The focus originally, or the first 4 books, was on artificial intelligence, then, transitioned into the quantum space. And again, Frank, as you know, the focus of my books and the focus of my work is really about the business adoption of quantum technology. There are lots of wonderful people out there who are PhDs or experts who are talking about the development, the research that goes along with quantum. My focus from day one has been, how do companies think about quantum technologies? Could be sensing, could be communication, could be computing. And how do those companies think about quantum technologies and how they might adopt and take advantage of those in the future?
Right, exactly. And where has the industry's really come a long way? We had one guest saying that the pandemic really kind of slowed things down. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, it would explain a lot of the data points, but things are really heating up, particularly certainly in 2025, but certainly in the last month or two. I know Candice has been tracking a lot of stuff and doing a lot of reports for industry and countries, of which, and you're in Canada, so is Candice. So Canada is really, really a big player in this space. And
certainly is.
Yeah.
One of the ways that you can articulate that is how Canada just produced its national strategy around quantum as it relates to security. Next week, I'm going to be moderating a panel on that very topic in Vancouver, because people are now thinking, in the past, I really didn't need to think about quantum computing as a priority on my IT agenda. But now countries like Canada are saying our government is preparing for the quantum future. Whether you agree with their timeline or not, they're preparing for the quantum future today. So what does that mean for business? What does that mean for CTOs and CEOs and how they think about quantum computing, for something that was 5 or 10 years away forever? Now what does it mean if the government's already preparing? What should they be doing?
Right. What do
Exactly,
you
because business always moves way faster than government. So for
Mhm.
government to, especially for Canada to be, trying to implement its strategy and have some real players in industry, that's very exciting. It's very exciting, I find.
what do you think the main driver of this is? This national security related to encryption, or is it kind of the people are seeing that quantum is going to be a major industry driver for the next 100 years?
So
Uh,
for me, there is no question about it. The priority is risk.
right.
So if you are an organization who understands the challenge that says your data, your client's data could be at risk, and it could already starting to be harvested by bad actors, then you are starting to realize that, we need some additional protection. So whether that's through fortified layers of post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution and one tab and various other different solutions, or just simply trying to get an understanding of what quantum technology is about. Maybe that means just hiring one person in your organization to start doing that investigation. But really, the priority here is about the risk. There is all sorts of great work going on in optimization and in transportation, logistics, finance. There's still lots of debate out there about the benefits truly accruing to some of the breakthroughs of the technology. That's one of the things that I've really focused on is the anti-hype aspect. Make sure you do your research, make sure you have the resources in your organization in order to do that analysis. Don't simply rely on a large mainstream article about a breakthrough and the number of qubits. Not so relevant. What's more relevant is you and your team looking at your business priorities and determining where quantum fits in. Like it's the other way around. And so you asked, sort of where the focus is for business. The focus is definitely on risk.
Are you trying to sell quantum tech to people who still think AI is cutting edge? Then you need the Quantum Sales Playbook, Selling Outcomes. Not Qubits by Frank Larvine and Candice Gilhooly. It's the first real-world guide to turning deep tech into actual deals with proven strategies for breaking through buyer confusion and closing revenue in pharma, finance, aerospace, and more. Get your copy now for just $7.99 on Amazon. And if you run a quantum accelerator, Frank and Candice will give your startups free copies, no qubits required.
Interesting. But also with that risk comes opportunity, right? We've seen
Mhm.
IBM and HSBC make an announcement about how they're able to do better trading, get an actual quantifiable return
Yep.
by using quantum computing. So it's kind of that weird mix, right? Like we don't really know where this strange quantum train is going to take us, but we know it's going to take us somewhere, and there's going to be risks. They're going to be kind of, if you bury your head in the sand, you're going to be expose yourself to every risk imaginable, and even ones we can't imagine, right? But also, there's a big path forward because if if a bank can get, let's say, 10% better returns on their options tradings by using quantum computing, then anyone who doesn't adopt it. So it's kind of that exciting mix of risk and opportunity.
Hmm.
Those iterative improvements across trillions of transactions
Right.
is really significant. And so you've got leaders like Philip Intalura at HSBC who understands those opportunities, has the sort of background and wherewithal to be able to have the conversations with the C-suite and the board to say, this is important. We need to be making these investments and we need to be doing it yesterday. And they were doing it yesterday in the sense that they've been doing this for a number of years, building up to this capability. And by far, HSBC and Philip and his team are one of the leaders. He's also got JP Morgan Chase and a number of others who have invested in quantum, whether it's strictly optimization or building up those firewalls I talked about. I'm very excited about it. If someone said, can you take quantum computing off the shelf? We're nowhere near there. But if you want to get your team thinking about the future and your competitiveness, now is absolutely the time.
So, how would you define quantum readiness for enterprises today?
Mhm. So, Candace, if you had asked me that question 4 years ago, I would have had the comment that said, well, at least have one person on your team that's actually thinking through what quantum means. But we're well beyond that. We now need to know that we've got partners who have good solutions, reliable solutions for any of those priorities. You need to understand what the government is starting to put out into the marketplace in terms of compliance measures or what they're doing for their departments. So if every single department of a government unit has to have a plan for quantum technologies, then what does that plan look like and how does that relate to us? There's so much potential for an organization to spin their wheels on understanding what's truly a breakthrough in a technology. Is it 56 qubits is good or 6,000 is good? And just like I posted on LinkedIn today, there are a number of Substack writers and LinkedIn writers who are very credible in their positions on quantum computing technology. And organizations are going to save a lot of time if they're reading those Substacks and really getting a good idea of what's credible, what's not so credible, and get a balanced view. So I've talked about the people, I've talked about the vendors, I've talked about the government, and I've talked about some resources, but it's also the investment. There's lots of investment in the industry, but most of that investment in 2025 has been national governments. You look back to 2023, there was a lot of investment from the venture capital world. In 2025, big investments from the government environment. And so organizations need to think about their own IT portfolios and how can they insert the quantum technology. So I think I've given them maybe 5 different ways that organizations can really sort of get going.
Right. What do you think drove the flow of venture capital to and then away? And you see that venture capital coming back to quantum.
Well, Frank, I think you and I were both of the age of the AI winters.
Right.
And we saw it so many times, whether it was in the 80s or in the 2000s, where promises were made around the technology that seemed to exceed their capabilities. And in fact, they did until really the 2010s, 2015s, when we started to see some real out of the lab into the commercial environment for AI. So a lot of that expectation setting back in, call it, 2020 was within 5 years, within 10 years. And
Right.
2030 seemed to be a magic number. And so the challenge of not meeting those expectations necessarily for the venture capitalists who have a limited time span for investment was sort of what drove the initial investment and then maybe a little bit of a lackluster investment, and a couple of years after that. We're still talking about 2030 as a Q day or a Y2Q, so years to quantum, where the day when quantum computers can decrypt traditional computers, and we look at it, that's really only 4 years away. And so will that truly be, which is well within planning periods for companies. And so, will that truly hit is a big question. Lots of different views across the spectrum. We have people who believe that it's well more than 10 years from today, whereas others, we had a view from NATO that it was about 3 years away, and that was last year. So, and you think about digital transformations, for example, if you recall, big digital transformations took anywhere from 2 to 10 years. And if you're a company that's thinking about quantum, which is a much more complex technology, potentially, that time frame for you is much shorter for you to have started in order to reach those sort of timelines. So it's a very interesting dynamic, but there has not been that breakthrough moment. There hasn't been that ChatGPT moment. There hasn't been that sort of, aha, I need to because everybody else is getting it kind of moment.
No, that's true. And like people forget there are always like interesting events, interesting keynotes, right? Interesting things said at CES and whatnot. But there are some of them that really are world changing, right?
Mhm.
There was Netscape going public, right? I'm old
Mhm.
enough to remember that. That actually went public about a month before I launched my website, franksworld.com, believe it or not. So
Wow.
that was 30 years ago. It was like August-ish, 1995. There was the launch of the iPhone, right? There was the ChatGPT moment, right? Like in every moment in the tech world kind of starts from that. You're right. We not really had that in quantum, right? I don't think the HSBC announcement, while big, is one of those generational moments.
Mhm.
But I do wonder what a generational moment would look like. And I guess you really don't know what it is until you see it, right? Like,
That's right. Even the HSBC announcement, people would scrutinize it saying, well, it actually provides a benefit in this small pillar of
right,
business relative versus a broad thing. Whereas, things like ChatGPT would work with the whole population of the world.
right.
You could simply do one sentence and you would start to generate. And of course, it's changed the world of search because AI is now at the top of every search, sort of facility, right? So people expect that there's that capability. Um, we know that quantum computing is not going to be used for every single application. It's just not necessary. So what applications, if you, let's say you call it 90-10, what 10% of the applications are truly, truly difficult to solve that you can then apply to quantum? So, it's within the toolbox, but it's not the toolbox.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
So
Um,
it'll be very interesting, Frank. I've seen many of your Impact Quantum podcasts, and you guys dive really deep into the subject matter, and that's fantastic to see. More and more people need to understand a little bit what's behind the curtain, just like when we started working in neural nets and machine learning and artificial intelligence, just to be able to understand the bias or the damage that garbage in garbage out can do. We don't necessarily need to see the transistors in our laptop to understand how it works or how to actually use it. Same thing will apply to quantum computers, but at the same time, if the accuracy level is not there, let's say you get 99.999% accuracy on your technology. Well, again, on trillions of transactions or pieces of data, that last nine can represent a real error rate for you as an organization. So if they're looking at it from a shall we purchase this sort of technology, really, really key to think about those nines and where it applies to your business.
So I'm kind of, how should enterprises start building their internal quantum literacy without over investing too early?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's so important that there's a champion within the organization who sees the potential or the risk, as we talked about, that actually has a voice at the table. And so it's very difficult building it from the ground up. Saying quantum technology is important for our organization. Well, what's quantum? I don't know how many elevator conversations I've had with C-suite people that within 30 seconds, I had to be able to describe what quantum computing was. And so it's that, which is a very difficult task to do for most people.
Well, that's
So
actually what I was going, that's another question that I'm going to follow up with. Like, how do you describe what quantum computing is to the layperson?
yeah, so whenever I'm talking to a C-suite person or a CTO, my first question is, what are some of your biggest technology problems? And so they would lay out those problems, and I say, well, which ones are the most difficult? That'll be very, very challenging to ever solve. And so they give me those, and I say, what if I had a solution that might be able to address those?
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got a conversation.
Yes.
So
No, that's a good way to put it.
without saying entanglement or superconducting or superposition or any of those sorts of key factors in quantum computing. So that's where I'm able to grab their attention, that would put it on the table. And so they need to be able to go back to their organizations and say, when we think about the future, we think about the hardest problems we have to solve. What if we could what if we could actually address those problems either in real time or in short order, where we cannot do it today, no matter how great our supercomputers are.
Okay. That's the way in.
No, I mean, and that's fair, right? And I thank you for the compliment because, Candace was trying to get me to reboot the show. Well, it took you about 6-8 weeks to do that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, because I think you started learning about quantum computing and you were like, and we kind of had this conversation back and forth about like, well, if I did reboot the show, I'd want to change the focus from kind of the software engineer point of view, because I think that's too narrow to, the quantum industry, we'll call it, right? Whatever name it eventually gets, right? It's going to look probably something like a chip industry and a software industry, right? Like, so it's kind of, they're going to need marketers, right? They're going to need recruiters. They're going to need more than just the physicists. And we were talking to somebody who pretty early on in our investigatory phase of restarting the show was saying like, there's already enough physicists in quantum computing, right? We don't need any more of them, right? There's plenty already, right? Then that really kind of sparked the idea, like, yeah, you're right. Like, we're going to need, like you said, you're going to have to be in an elevator with somebody in a C-suite and explain what this fixes or solves potentially in 30 seconds or less, right? And you can't,
by the way,
can't
Candace,
start talking
did I
about
do it?
qubits. You did a great job, by the way. That was great. I mean, that was great. Like, and probably one of the better ones I've heard. I won't speak for Candace, but like, I mean, you did a great job. Like, because as try as I might, I still think like a software engineer / data scientist / technologist, right? So like, I would say like, my answer would be like, well, all the computers we're using now are based on one type of technology. We've kind of hit the upper limit of that. This is a new type of computation that uses fundamental laws of physics and could solve problems that have been out of reach up till now.
Yep.
Right?
And all I would say is that the people who are creating the technology fall in love with the technology.
Yep.
And they want to tell you how great it is, in terms of its qubit strength, or in terms of its accuracy, or in terms of the PhDs they have on board. To the buyer, that's less relevant than what can it do for me. And so, it's, to your point, it's changing. There were 750 vendors in the quantum space last year. The number will consolidate. We'll start to see more and more acquisitions and mergers within the space, bringing different capabilities together. It's just necessary. And people building out those skills. I've talked about the quantum strategist for years and years. That's somebody inside your organization who understands your organization, but also understands quantum and its potential, and bringing those two skills together. And I would be very surprised if you don't have the marketers or the human resource people or others lining up for the quantum industry. As you saw, lots of tech layoffs and lots of change in the tech industry as a result of agentic AI and generative AI and all sorts of different AI agents. So that's dramatically changing the technology industry. But here we have another industry that's emerging,
Right.
and billions of dollars going into it, and increasingly as we go from 10 different modalities down to a couple of different modalities, really sort of stabilizing in terms of what quantum computing will be based on in the future. So I think you're 100% right. I think this is an industry that's growing and growing in lots of different ways.
So, how can we attract and retain more diverse talent, both technically and cognitively, to the quantum workforce?
Well, it's interesting, and in some ways, I've been trying to do that with linking into LinkedIn influencers, for example, who have hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers in the AI and general technology space, and making sure that they're aware of what's going on in the quantum space. That's just one possible way of doing it. Your podcast obviously is another way where people can sort of identify, oh, that's interesting. Why are they talking about quantum? And, is there an opportunity there for me? When I think about the conferences that are going on around the world, there are probably 50 quantum conferences on an annual basis, at least. A lot of those appeal to the technical side, but over time, we're going to start seeing more move into the more commercial mainstream side as the technology stabilizes. So I think there's a number of different ways, Candace, that people are becoming aware of it. And to me, that's just the amazing part of being part of this industry, is to see it evolve.
It is cool. Like, we never saw how the silicon industry evolved, right? And now we're here, and we can kind of see how this industry will evolve, right? It's kind of exciting.
Candace, I think you're still on.
I'm still on. Did we lose Frank?
So why don't you grab the host until
No
Frank comes
problem.
back?
Okay, I don't know what happened, so I will continue. No worries. And we'll cut this out, so we'll be able to figure it out. So let me ask you about a little bit more about policy and ethics.
Yep.
How do you see the global geopolitics shaping the race for quantum supremacy or advantage?
Well, so what's interesting to me is that they're so geopolitically, regionally dispersed. So, what I mean by that is there's, essentially a North American approach or US driven approach to, whether it's cryptography or it is, the ethical approach. Similarly, Europe as a region has collectively got together and extended GDPR to quantum, and, started more quantum ethics committees, because as you think about what are some of the ethical challenges, well, as soon as that first quantum computer is available, whoever created it probably won't tell the world about it, because they'll be the ones collecting, data from all over the place. And so, how are governments going to react to those sorts of instances? So Europe as a region, and then you've got, China and Russia doing their things. So, there is no one size fits all AI ethical responsible committee. And so it'll be very interesting to see the accountability or the teeth that comes in behind such policies. And so, the quantum vendors who are out there today are part of those committees. They're thinking about, how do they ensure that they evolve ethically and responsibly. But, I would say it's years and years away from any kind of maturation. I think artificial intelligence still has an environment where there are policies, but less teeth, less focus on the dealing with bad actors. So it'll be very interesting to see what transpires in the next few years, but I don't think it'll be one size fits all. I think we're going to see lots of different policies around the world.
Right. I see it as a Sputnik race as opposed to a massive collaboration. I feel that almost like every qubit, there's going to be a company behind that technology who's going to wave their flag that they got there first, and
Yep.
then it'll be very segmented in terms of addressing specific problems and giving them the solutions that they need that you can do with quantum, right?
Yep.
And there's been so much conversation about hybrid lately, these hybrid computers. I mean, to me, what do you think about that? Do you think that that is the natural next step?
To
Is
me,
to move?
100, it is 100%. And, if I think about simplicity like payroll, you're going to continue to do that on your classical systems. You're going to continue to do those administrative tasks. They're cost effective. They're simple. And the only complexity in a hybrid world is the interoperability of your quantum and classical systems. How real time is the data moving back and forth, and is that the best sort of approach that your company can use in order to function? And what does that mean in terms of how you change your operations? If you can get, real-time data on portfolio optimization capabilities, are you, inserting the human in the equation? Are you allowing it to flow through completely automated because you're making decisions in nanoseconds? How close is your cloud or your call center to the physical servers? All those sorts of questions fit into a hybrid world, not even mentioning supercomputer capabilities, which today are continuously very relevant. There are lots of things that a quantum computer, they say can do, but really a supercomputer can do it just as well and has been doing it consistently. And so, the question of hybrid is just how, not whether, you know.
Okay. Okay. So I like that. Have not whether. So what initially inspired the creation of the Quantum Strategy Institute? And how has that mission evolved?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to say that it has evolved. So when we first started out, I was going to quantum conferences around the world, and inevitably what I saw was there was lots of vendors, lots of researchers, but no end users. And so my question was back then, is this simply a technology that has no buyers? And so, you might see MasterCard, you might see Boeing at those initial conferences, but very few. And so what I looked at that in terms of artificial intelligence, maybe a decade prior to that, where again, it was great technology with no buyers. No one knew what they could do with artificial intelligence. And so back in 2021, it was the same sort of thing. I started talking to some other experts in the field, people from NVIDIA, from Google, from World Bank, from Standard Chartered Bank. So, large organizations as well as some more entrepreneurial ones, and said, are you seeing this? And they said, absolutely, we're seeing this. I said, okay, if that's the case, then how are these organizations going to understand in common language how they can use quantum technologies? And again, this was a very sort of philanthropic endeavor. We don't charge for anything. Our website's available. And what we do is we do full reports, we do articles, we do conference attendances, we do symposiums, and so the idea behind the Quantum Strategy Institute, or its mission, is to accelerate the adoption of quantum technologies around the world. And so the feedback that we've got since we started was that you have helped enable us, whether it's a country, a region, an individual corporation, to understand quantum technologies in those common language terms so that we can then start doing the next level of research.
Okay. So Because you're looking at all of this. So what strategic blind spots do you see in how governments and corporations are framing their quantum roadmaps?
So I think a couple of different ways. One is the time perspective. So there are some countries who say that they want to have their governments set up completely for quantum security by 2035. So I think that's too far out. And then there are 99% of organizations, I would say, around the world who are small, medium businesses who haven't even heard the word quantum and don't really know what that's all about.
Right.
And so is it still, the Max Planck, Albert Einstein, quantum mechanics stage, or where is it? And so I think there's two huge gaps, in terms of one, understanding the timing, and two, understanding that you need to be involved. And so I did this survey of all the countries around the world to find out what the percentage of the population was small and medium-sized businesses. And in most countries, it's over 99%. Now, that doesn't mean the number of employees, but the number of businesses. And so I would suggest to you that the lion's share of companies around the world aren't even aware of this technology. And so that may translate into a have and have not kind of environment where if you're producing competitive results using quantum computers or protecting yourself using quantum technology, it's going to be a very distinct group between haves and have-nots.
Do you think that opens up the door, though, for a company like Salesforce.com made CRM available to every company effectively, right?
Yep.
Do you think that there'll be an opportunity for something like a Salesforce.com, but for quantum?
Yeah, remember if you look at the security side, for example,
Right.
and you're a company that can sort of pull a QKD or PQC sort of off the shelf, that sounds great. The problem is you've got to integrate it. So there's
Right.
a next step that maybe Salesforce wouldn't necessarily get involved in, potentially at this point in time, that they'll need a intermediary to make that happen. And some of the vendors do that themselves, where
Right.
they help to integrate. And so I think it's still quite far out. The opportunity absolutely makes sense if you have it as a package where
Right.
not only can you get the software, but you can also get the integration and the maintenance that goes along with it and so on. We're going to see, even in the next couple of years, some incredible evolution, not only of the technology, but in the business scape.
I can see that. No, I mean, like, it wasn't so much that Salesforce would do it, but if I'm a small company, Salesforce has really made it so CRM is within everybody's reach now, right? And there's the HubSpot, and there's a whole bunch of them, right? Like,
Yeah, and the other idea is that most of what you do in terms of cloud computing is, in terms of quantum computing, is cloud-based.
yeah,
Right. And so you're going through their servers, whether it's Amazon Braket or Microsoft Azure or, some other sort of broad-based platform to get access to your computing requirements. And so that obviously, gives you the security that goes along with it, in their servers and in the background. So, the most likely scenario is not that you as an individual have a quantum computer on your desk or in your facility or nearby. Most likely you'll be using cloud computing in some way, shape, or form.
interesting.
What advice would you give students or professionals who want to future-proof their careers around quantum without a physics background?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know, before we started recording, we were talking about how I got into it, and I'm a banker by background, and got into the AI world and then quantum, but again, just simply because I was curious. And there's so many ways in 2025 to learn about quantum technologies, whether it's simply on YouTube, through LinkedIn, through some Substacks. So you can very quickly get up to speed on what the overall technology is and decide where you might play. So not everybody has to be a quantum engineer. They can be in marketing, they can be in HR, but at least have that fundamental understanding of what quantum is trying to achieve. And the other thing is, we're seeing a significant change at the junior levels in a lot of white collar organizations. You've probably talked about it, where those functions can be done via agentic AI. And then all the oversight can be done at more senior levels. So whether that's a legal profession or otherwise. And so those opportunities are going away for, college graduates or university graduates. And so they're looking for other places to go. That could be in the trades, or it could be in quantum. And so using their, base skills to understand, computing as a whole, it's not so difficult to make that leap into the quantum space.
No, that's a good point. And I think that people who are in college now or early in their career really need to reevaluate. Are we overreacting on terms of relying on things like agentic AI? Probably,
Mhm.
but there probably will be kind of like the pendulum will swing back in the other direction.
Yep.
But I don't know how long that'll take.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Excuse me.
some of the best GPTs are only at about 85% accuracy. So what
Right.
does that mean for you in terms of your organization? Well, it could mean sufficient level of efficiencies that you can correct for that 15%. So, and that's where a lot of companies are going, saying, you know what, we can get these basic functions done, whether it's precedents in legal cases, judge decisions in legal cases. And that used to be what a entry level law student would bring to the table. And if that can be replaced, and then we just simply have supervision from a human being. So, when I think about the quantum world, we're just getting started. The runway is long. And so there's a great opportunity for people who really want to be curious and study the space and take that leap into a new world of technology.
Interesting.
So you can see I have a pretty optimistic view of this. I've been studying it for the last 6 years, and things always don't necessarily go as fast as people would like them to. But I think there's a level of persistence, and or as an industry, we're making enough progress. You think about what's happening in quantum sensing these days. You've got companies like Inflection who have been selling their quantum sensing products for a number of years, and they improve over GPS. So if you're in a military environment and your planes are being jammed via GPS, but you have quantum sensors on board, it's not an issue. You have much more accurate penetration through the ground, and you are in a position where your pilots are much safer. We started with MRIs, and we're now, in places where crops are being analyzed with drones, with quantum sensors on board. So part of the industry is already making substantial moves and are generating revenues. We're seeing a lot of activity in the quantum communication space, where whether it's 100 kilometers or thousands of kilometers of communication, where the communication itself is protected. And so a number of companies are doing that. Quantum computing, which is always the most interesting, is probably the laggard of the three, but for good reason, where you've still got classical computers, supercomputers that are still doing the job.
Interesting.
What personally excites you or worries you the most about the convergence of AI and quantum computing?
So I guess the question for me is, I see the value in the efficiency of both of those combining. My concern is in the accuracy of doing something faster, but multiple times in terms of the accuracy level. So if I'm making investment bets and I'm using AI, and I know it's only 85% accurate, but I'm doing it trillions of times in the span of a second, where does that lead us in terms of our investment decisions for a financial organization? You're going to put in all sorts of guideposts. You're going to put in ways that you can control that activity in some way, shape, or form to protect yourself. So the question is, can you scale that kind of combination within your organization? Do you have enough applications that actually, bring quantum and AI together? Is it simply a national or a large corporate opportunity? Or do you look 5 years out and say, well, it's an off-the-shelf opportunity for those small and medium-sized businesses? So again, we're still talking about the biggest problems, whether it's, chemistry combinations or financial optimization. Organizations like Microsoft have said their focus is on life sciences and chemical combinations. They think that is going to be the next large opportunity for scaling. And so that's where they're making their bet. I was fortunate enough to be invited to Seattle when they did their Majorana chip announcement, and they were very clear about that. They believe that is their major opportunity. And you can imagine with something that typically takes 12 years to investigate chemical combinations for new drugs or new ideas, this is a great opportunity for them to employ quantum technologies.
Interesting. Because chemistry itself, right, and biology and all that, they're all a lot of what we would perceive as randomness and not understandable are driven by quantum processes.
Well, if you took the periodic table and you tried to create combinations for all of those individual elements, it would take millennium. Like
Right.
you need to have a different computational capability in order to run those combinations and decide, which ones are the most valuable.
No, that's a good point.
Oh, wow, that's so fantastic. I've never thought of that before.
We kind of it was kind of implied by something one of our previous guests, Alex Kahn, had said, where he was talking about that realistically, I'm paraphrasing it, he said it way more elegantly, right? I'll just put it right out there. He said it way more elegantly. You can listen to the episode, but something to the effect of chemistry is inherently a quantum type of system, so it makes sense that this would work.
Yeah, and if you think about the way that chemistry is done today,
Right.
they combine elements, experiment, fail, experiment, fail, and keep trying over and over again until they come up with something that's a good combination. Whereas, if you could do that same sort of exercise in a much shorter period of time, it would be much more effective.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know how much money big pharma puts into research and development, but there's probably at least 10 to 20 things that don't make it out of the lab for everything that does make it out of the lab. And behind each of those 10, 20 things is probably 100 different experiments, right? So if they can shorten that kind of failure window, I think that there'd be a lot of interesting things come out of it.
Not to mention those combinations react differently with individual people.
Right.
And so, how do you determine, again, that you need a population database to run those possible scenarios against, not just the chemical combinations. So, it's a very interesting opportunity for that industry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and chemistry touches so many things, whether it's pharmaceuticals, life sciences, material science, a lot of things. If you speed up that process, you're going to improve things a lot of ways. You're going to improve a lot of things, right? Like whether it's tires that last longer, better energy storage, which I think is which is definitely something that's sorely needed. As someone who's built kind of small scale solar panel systems and portable stuff, the batteries are always the thorn in my side, right? Like it's really easy to slap up. The solar panel part's been more or less solved, but the energy storage from said solar panels is anything but solved. And maybe you can even get more efficient solar panels out of it, right? I forget. Cutting edge now is what, 30-40% efficiency, which means we'll never get to 100% efficiency. I'm well aware of thermodynamics, but if we can get closer to 80, gee, that would be nice, right?
Yeah, and lots of organizations within the industry, in the quantum industry, are working on solutions for batteries specifically.
Right. Yeah, because I think that could potentially be like the next major industry, outside of quantum, right? I think that this is going to empower kind of, if done right, this could empower like a golden age, right? This is me putting my optimism hat on, right? Far enough away from Monday, close enough to Friday to be optimistic now, right? Like, that, this really could, help us develop better medicines, customized medicines, combined with AI. I think, if we solve that. Plus, there's also a very real practical concern about AI right now, right? You can't build enough data centers.
Yep.
Right. And not every AI problem, I think, is suitable to be solved in a quantum way. But certainly a lot of the loss functions and, finding the optimization issues, would be better suited for quantum and potentially
and
use
if
less
you look
power.
at that, if you look at that compartmentalization,
Right.
large data, low complexity is an AI solution. Low data, high complexity is a quantum environment. So to be able to look at how you can combine those two things is a big next step. And you know what? Maybe in a year or two, you'll bring me back and we'll have another conversation.
That'd be awesome. Well, hopefully we won't let it be 2 years this time, I promise. And well, remember, for a big chunk of the time that between shows the show was like kind of defunct. But we realized that we could talk to you for another hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. So any final places? I know you mentioned Substack a number of times. So where can folks find out more about you and what you're up to and your Substack?
Yep. So I'm thrilled that Quantum's business it's grown 50% over the last year. So many people are getting into the interest and enthusiasm for quantum, but in a way that's not simply a archive paper. And certainly I continue on LinkedIn and through the Quantum Strategy Institute. It's wonderful that I get to continue working with existing businesses through my consulting practice, which keeps it real. So certainly if anybody would like to connect or understand what's going on, they can start with LinkedIn or Quantum's business and get what they need.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Any parting thoughts you'd like to share?
Listen, I hope you keep up with your Impact Quantum podcast. I've seen the evolution of Bailey.
Oh, awesome.
So that's been fantastic. And I just want to thank you for having me on.
Awesome.
Oh,
well,
our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
And speaking of Bailey, we'll let RAI finish the show.
That's all for this episode of Impact Quantum. A huge thanks to our guest, Brian Lenahan, for sharing his insights on quantum strategy and for being a long-time supporter of the show. And of yours truly. If you'd like to learn more about Brian's work, visit the Quantum Strategy Institute or connect with him on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay curious and stay quantum.